everyone. Welcome to another MWC Short. I'm very lucky to be joined here virtually by Glenn Lurie, who is the President and CEO of Synchronoss. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we were meant to be part of a session, or Glenn was meant to be part of a session taking place in Barcelona around the topic of IoT and data analytics. And Glenn was talking about the future of smart buildings, amongst other things, and how he sees the future of IoT developing. So without further ado, I'm going to jump straight in, Glenn, and just ask you a few questions and we can have a bit of a chat around this topic.
That'd be terrific.
Great. So you have in the past been referred to as the father of IoT. How have you seen things materializing? How have you seen this market developing? And is it kind of in line with what you've expected and what you expect to see in the future?
Well, first of all, being called the father of IoT makes me feel very old. So I'm not sure I love that title. Yeah, I mean, I think the market has developed. Look, I was fortunate enough to be in IoT before it was IoT. In fact, we called it emerging devices back in 2008. And we had high hopes. And I think when you look at how the market has fared, number one, I think that the ecosystem, the industry, and again, when you think about IoT, it touches so many different industries, has done a pretty nice job of wirelessly enabling things. Whether you talk about cars, we're going to talk about buildings more in a minute. You think about what we were trying to accomplish was simply to make things smarter and make people's lives better. I think that piece of it we've done pretty well. I would argue, though, the revenue piece of it hasn't come along with it. I think we expected sitting here in 2020 that this would be significantly more revenue growth, a greater part of what you would call carrier and ecosystem revenue, which it really hasn't happened. I would tell you, though, that I think we are still in the beginning stages, and saying that, 12, 13 years after we were talking about it for the first time, it is taken longer because the stars needed to align, right? Early on, wireless enabling something that didn't have the right business model with it made no sense, and you couldn't make the model work. Now we know that, number one, cars are going to be wirelessly enabled. About 70% of the cars coming off the line in the US today, and globally that number goes up, are connected. Now the question is, are those being efficient in their own ecosystem? We've talked about smart cities for years. We have a lot of great pilots running around the world, a lot of things here and there, but truly that hasn't come about the way I think we all would have liked to see it. And that problem is, again, the business model doesn't work. The cities don't have the dollars, right? And then you have to do public-private partnerships, and that's coming along probably slower than we'd like. So I say overall, we've made progress. I really believe the next 10 years, the progress will be significantly faster. The velocity will be much higher, and we'll see more things come together in a way that actually truly makes people's lives better.
Okay, excellent. And part of speeding that up, I guess, will be 5G and the impact that will have. And just to come back to what you touched on before when it comes to smart buildings, can you talk a bit about that? How do you see the future of smart buildings developing? What's the impact of 5G going to be?
Sure. So let me start with 5G. 5G is massive. And look, I've been in the industry and seen all the Gs. And all the Gs before 5G were about faster, and more capacity. That's really was the focus. 5G is finally the first G that's about use cases. And one of the key use cases is IoT. One of the key use cases is low power. One of the key use cases is putting an infrastructure together. And I think we all see the virtualization happening in the networks. We see the edge, cloud, and compute happening. And those are all really important pieces that will make delivering an quote unquote IoT experience much different. And it will, again, speed up the innovation and the adoption. When you look at buildings, the reason we, Synchronoss, got into smart buildings because we got asked to by our carrier partners. When you look at a smart city, you can kind of go about it. You can try to boil the ocean and say, oh, we're going to connect everything, which, by the way, hasn't worked. Or you can look at key aspects of a city and say, let's start there. And we have had lots of conversations. We've obviously done deals with major carriers globally around smart buildings. Why? Because it's a great place to start, right? You think about sustainability, you think about emergency response, you think about all these pieces of where people live in a massive city, and they're living most of their lives in a building, whether it's where they work, where they live, or they play, they're in a building. And the idea of these buildings, majority of them are dumb. Majority of them have 3, 4, 5 different systems in them that don't talk to each other, and the way they run them is the way they ran them 20 years ago. So the idea and the platform that we got involved with, and we have now we made a small acquisition and now built upon, allows us to take all of those disparate devices in the building, bring them all into a central hub, and deliver a single GUI interface to run your whole building. So it's almost the concept of a smart home or a connected car, but you're taking the entire building and bringing it together. Now, why is that important? Well, number one, you very simply, that building owner can reduce energy usage. That building owner can drive sustainability. That building owner can have a safer building. You cannot have the outages. You can see when a air conditioning unit is going to go out, because you actually can now see and monitor on a daily or a per minute basis real-time data around your building. It's also important because that data allows you to connect multiple buildings in the city, or if you really wanted to, connect a whole city. And now you start talking about the ideas around emergency response and other aspects of safety for the public. And if you go one step further, well, who should that building talk to? Well, that building should definitely talk to my office or your office you're sitting in, and have pieces of that work together. It should also talk to your automobile, right? So why in the world wouldn't my car that I park in that building every day not be and have interaction together to make my life better? And then obviously you then start talking about smart cities and bringing it together. So the view we have is this is just one component that allows us to start to bring the other components into a single customer experience. And that's the goal. And we're pretty excited about the platform. We're getting a lot of great feedback. Wish I was in Barcelona next week talking about it more and more with customers. This is a fantastic opportunity, but we really think that has a catalyst to be this kind of inward out drive of what ends up being a smart city by starting with the buildings.
Great. So that's a great place to start, smart buildings. Can you talk a bit about the scale? So what are the key elements? What do we need to do to really scale this?
Yeah, I think, look, it's the scale's easy. I mean, one of the beautiful things about this is software, right? These buildings already have hardware. We have the capability to bring all that data coming out of all those different components and disparate devices that are hardware into a single place from the software perspective. So this is one of those opportunities where really a SaaS model works beautifully. And the building owners are looking for this, the business model to work. Well, if you bring this in and you reduce energy usage, you become more efficient, it pays for itself in a very short period of time. So the nice thing is there's actually a great business model here for it. But one of your early questions is the key is this is all about data. It's all about relevant real-time data, allowing you to make real-time decisions on how you want to manage something. And that's the beauty of IoT. I mean, when you really get to the crux of what IoT is, yes, to make someone's life better, that means you need relevant data. You need that relevant data to allow you to make great decisions and timely decisions, depending on what you're trying to make a decision about. The beauty of this is it is really scalable. And really every city in the world is looking at different aspects of how they bring this in. Because just walking into a city with really great slideware and saying, hey, we want to connect your whole city is one way about it. But then you start talking about what's the business model to go put a sensor on every streetlight? What's the business model to go connect every building and to connect? You start to get in places that make it hard to actually execute. Our goal here is to bring these bite-sized chunks that you can execute. And then the key is going to be bringing that umbrella of software that allows you to bring those things together so they can talk to each other so you have a single experience.
Great, thank you, Glenn. One last thing I want to try and delve into before we wrap up. You were going to talk about a specific case study within this session, had we been in Barcelona next week. So can I get you to just tell us a bit more about this specific case study? I know it involves a smart airport, so maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, one of the things that, like I said, as we've been talking today, it's really, really exciting is depending on what problems you're trying to solve. I can give you a couple that are really, they seem simple and they seem like you should be able to solve them. Let me start with one that we're working with a a company that their product needs to be refrigerated. It needs to be refrigerated from the time it comes off the line to the time it goes into the truck to the time it's delivered to the store. And their problem was they had no way to track. So you walked into one of their distribution centers, they had hundreds of refrigerators that, believe it or not, still in 2020, they had a person walking around and checking that all the refrigerators were working all day long, 24/7. They also didn't have the ability to track in the truck if the truck's refrigeration was working all the way. And the amount of loss that they had was significant, which obviously raised the prices of their product and made their life very difficult. We've been able to go in and put sensors on every one of those refrigerators, put sensors in every one of their trucks to give them a simple single GUI interface to not only track every single refrigerator and see if anyone is not working correctly or the temperature's wrong, all the way to the truck, and we can reduce almost all loss. That paid back within a year. I mean, that's a very easy, simple payback for this specific case. And it sounds simple and it seems like a simple problem to solve, but actually very complex. And being able to do that, deliver the software, and be able to deliver it so a manager of that facility on a smartphone can monitor his whole business. That's one use case. The airport use case was a lot of airports. I mean, obviously airports are constantly being updated and built, but really most of the airports, they have Wi-Fi, but they're not smart buildings. Like the whole building isn't intelligent. All the different aspects of the building aren't connected, whether lighting, air conditioning, any sort of cameras, etc. And we're looking at some potential POCs, proof of concepts, where we can bring all of that together. Then you start to think about how you bring together not just the airport facilities, but we all know there's vendors in every one of those airports, right, who have their own needs. And you've also got the airlines themselves, et cetera, where we could potentially, and we believe we can, bring all of that again into a single interface. So a single general manager of an airport could see every aspect of their airport on a screen like I'm talking to you on. They can put in the predictive analytics. They can put in the machine learning, which we actually do. It's part of what we bring to the table. So now they can almost, I call it, have dummy lights, right, that they would be able to see. They'd get the warnings, alerts of things that are outside of the parameters that they wanted to set. So that's just two simple examples, obviously complex problems to solve, that we're all over and having conversations globally with customers about. And again, it comes back to, really simply, it comes back to software, it comes back to analytics, it comes back to using those analytics and using AI and obviously machine learning to be able to deliver outcomes that allow you to make decisions. That's simply what we're trying to do. And we're pretty excited about it. The opportunities are vast. Obviously, we can talk about this for hours.
Great. Thank you so much, Glenn. Unfortunately, we don't have hours. I could sit and talk for the rest of the afternoon, but I really appreciate you putting together this short for us and giving a bit of an insight into what you would have spoken about in Barcelona. And it's really interesting to hear some of the use cases come to life. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. And again, if anything I can do for GSMAi, let me know.
Thanks, Glenn.